everyone. Thanks for being with us today. So we're going to start a reflection episode on the past 3 episodes with Helen Moffat, Paula, and also with Bob Garner. And just touch on some points that were mentioned, maybe go a bit deeper into discussion on some points that we didn't have the chance to do so yet in these recordings. Maybe
yes.
Get started. So Asia, what do you want to explore more? Where do you think there's more to be discussed?
A lot more that has to be discussed. That's something that we've said a lot. And definitely there is the need to ask more stingy questions, I guess. So with Bob Garner, as we were talking before, we touched the idea of plant-based diet. There's so much more to say, so many points that have to be touched. Are we being, again, one point that I keep repeating myself is that we have to be more honest, even if people don't want to listen to it. They don't want to be, they just don't want to be real about it, because we have to keep a positive attitude. Since we've both done, like all 3 have done the climate reality training, Al Gore's main idea is being positive, bringing hope. And I think that's number 1 priority. Nothing taken away from that. However, when we have to be more honest, it's also to bring more feedback and more solutions to issues we're currently having. So I think that's something that has to be, I guess, more talked about in the plant-based diet. Can people afford it? Do people really want to do it? So with Bob Gardner, we talked about culture, and we talked about how it's just hard for people to even think about it as a concept, plant-based diet. Sometimes it's more expensive. We were saying that now even a carrot cake will be, labeled as vegan when it's just a simple carrot cake, or will be cost twice as much. So I guess that's something I would like to approach more in other episodes in general, and even in the specific topic. Just ask more questions that have to do with, are we really going the right way? Are we really approaching the conversation in this way to find more solutions in making sure that our carrot cake, of course, is not labeled as vegetarian? We know, of course, it doesn't have, animal-based ingredients, but it's also not going to cost me twice as much than a regular one, or it's not going to be judged as not tasting good.
So really delving more into the food dimensions that tie into climate change, which certainly include livestock and meat consumption.
Yes, indeed, that's something that we should do. So, and it's quite funny enough that I'm the only non-vegetarian among 3 of us. So I think I'm also the one who shouldn't be making this argument. So, Amy, what about you? You are vegan.
I'm vegetarian, but I've kind of been mostly vegetarian for most of my life. I kind of just never liked meat, but I've been fully vegetarian for, I think, 3 years now. And I think food is such an interesting topic as well, because it's such a personal thing in our lives. Like, it relates to how we socialize with other people. It relates to our health and our cultures as well. But it's also something, and I think this to Helen's podcast episode a lot, but it is something we have control over. So you can individually change your diet. And it might feel like you're not doing that much. I think that's an issue with people changing things individually with climate change, is like they feel like their individual action won't make a difference when climate change is such a huge issue. But at the same time, things like your diet does affect the people around you. Like, just you choosing to change your habits, other people will see that. And it also relates to the idea of being positive about it, is you don't have to shame people for their habits, but rather you can lead by example and say, this is what I've chosen for myself because it aligns with what I believe in, to do with environmentalism or climate change or animal rights. And you don't have to say your way of living is wrong, but rather look at this delicious food that I'm eating and look at how much healthier I am, and this is how it helps the climate. And you can, be far more positive and make it seem like the environmentally sound option is good for other parts of your life.
Makes me think when you say this about, I think it was a documentary, and it wasn't the really famous one. I'll already say this. It's not the fast food one, but I think it was just a general clip explaining how food can be extremely expensive, the healthy one, even just water. So Pepsi is actually cheaper in the States than water. So it's incredible when you think that you can make healthier choices, like you were saying, and you can make better choices for your body, leading by example, by saying, I'm just choosing a more plant-based diet, or I'm choosing these ingredients regardless of what they are because they will be healthier for me and the environment. But then if you think about that, Pepsi, again, is cheaper than water, and poor families may be buying Pepsi rather than water for their kids because that's all they can afford. In large quantities, probably, because you'd rather buy 2 bottles of Pepsi and, hopefully give something to drink to your kids rather than, buying 1 bottle of water that will finish as soon as you can, because water coming up from your pipes is also not filtered and it's not potable. So that's very important what you're saying. And I think that this argument also goes all the way up into politics. And I guess definitely this is not the episode to be, talking about this. But what you say is very important. And I guess we just have to talk more about it. That's why we're here then.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to say that food is very closely related to choices. And because it's so closely related to choices, it's an area in your life where you can make a lot of changes that do have positive impacts on the environment, positive or negative implications for animal rights, for example. But we do have to keep in mind that while you look at where you can make changes, it's important to realize that not everyone is in the position to do so necessarily financially, for example. But that if you are in the position to make changes, be that financially or otherwise, maybe questions of access, where you live, how much time you have to spend preparing food, health reasons, all of that ties into it. But yeah, looking at where you can make changes with.
I think for me that also relates quite a bit to Helen's episode, but also Paula's, in terms of being an activist within your community and fighting for what you believe to be right. Is that mostly I'm talking to middle class people, because you do have the luxury of choice. A lot of people don't have that choice. And I think because you do have a privilege and live with enough and often too much in our lives, like we have way more than we need when there are so many people who don't have enough to survive. And I think because you have that privilege, you also have a moral obligation to use that privilege to make the world a better place for people who can't speak up or who don't have the ability to influence other people as much as we do.
Amy, that is definitely well put, and that, I guess we can say that that's what we're trying to do with our podcast, in trying to speak out, because we can. We are all three privileged to live, I guess, well, and we're trying to speak out in those topics that either are not spoken about, not going in depth about, there are not enough facts about, and trying to speak with experts about, what can we do? And I think, at least with Paula's episode, the idea of defining an activist was exactly that you can lead by example, but not necessarily are you an activist. You're just making sure that your privilege could give better chance for people who cannot speak out to actually do so, or lead by example, but not necessarily are you an activist. And I think that was very important. Paula also mentioned that often the term activist, it's pinpoint for people to actually make themselves look better, use it as just a term for themselves, to talk about themselves, to be interviewed on TV, just to move forward. And a lot of this criticism was actually even set onto Greta Thunberg. She herself could, really good standards and really good mission. And of course, she's saying great and right things. But behind her, there's a lot of politics. There's a lot of media attention that unfortunately has put the word activist in a negative connotation, which I think that in her case is not right. She is, after all, doing the best that she can with her privilege. After all, she is leading by example in that sense, as you were saying, Amy. So I think that's very important, that when you do lead by example, there is no need to call yourself anything. You are just doing what's best for everybody, after all. I mean, it should be, as Lena likes to say, it is not rocket science. Like, it's just helping them doing anything. Actually not doing it there should be a term for people who don't do that. Instead of, going against those who try to do their best, we should do the other way around. You're not doing your best? Let's find a term for you.
And most importantly, it's about trying to make changes where you personally can make changes. And then maybe through that, you can inspire others to make changes as well.
But there's a lot of stigma in that. There's a lot of saying you can lead by example, but there's a lot of stigma as well. And I feel like we can be assured that this stigma can be thought of. We can push this away. And when we feel like we don't belong because we're the only ones maybe in our community doing this, it is yet okay. Because we are doing what's best, after all, in our own little world. Not best for everybody, but what's best for our community, what's best in our small examples, as you were saying, Lena.
Yeah, I think maybe it's like the term activist. People think it has to be these huge acts and getting out in the streets and protesting. And maybe if that encourages you to do more, use the term. It's just a label, after all. But I agree with you in that doing the right thing for climate issues or social justice issues or any kind of thing like that should be the norm. It should be the automatic choice. And so what you're saying of like, we should rather have a term which is about people who aren't doing that, because maybe that would encourage people to act out more in their daily lives and influence the people around them and stuff. So it should just be an automatic choice to do the right thing and to change your habits to make the world a better place.
Yes. So, Lena, speaking of personal choices, you're also vegetarian, right?
Pescatarian, yeah.
Pescatarian, okay. And what has led you to that choice?
Well, part of the reason was certainly environmental issues. When I found out about the environmental consequences of meat production, it was a personal choice to, play my role in this. Also, of course, I was financially able to do so and in a position to do so, but I identified this as a point where I could leave a more positive impact on the environment by reducing my meat consumption. And so for me, this was an easy choice to do that. But I think about the vegetarian and especially the vegan debate, it can seem like a lot of changes to make, and it's often framed as a very financial commitment also to become vegan. But I think this is also where the conversation can be changed, and you can maybe talk more in terms of shifting towards a more plant-based diet, for example, because that can already achieve quite a lot. It's a big step if you ask people to all of a sudden give up meat consumption, which can be very, culturally intertwined, with cultural customs and maybe history. I think country context also depends a lot. Has a big influence on what people eat and why. But if you, for example, push the conversation to move more towards plant-based foods, it's about decreasing meat consumption. You don't have to completely get rid of it in one go. Maybe, valuing quality over quantity. So, for example, meat that is, grown outside, not mass-produced. There's a lot of different factors that tie into the environmental footprint. And again, I think you can start with little steps. And also, I hope that the people that we interview, they already are kind of showing that there's a lot of different ways in which you can take action in your everyday life. And maybe not everyone will be able to or willing to make a change in their diet, but it certainly is an easy step because it's so closely related. It's really a choice, and there are opportunities to make changes to it in your daily life because everyone has to eat, but what we eat does influence the planet. And I think this links quite well to the interview with Bob Garner, who's showing that there's a lot of different ways you can take environmental action in your life. So he is vegan, but he's also running a business that is sustainable in the sense that it's ecotourism. So by doing that, he's deciding to dedicate his life to a sustainable endeavor but he's also enabling others maybe to make sustainable changes in their life by choosing to go on vacation to his accommodation, maybe open their mind to new ways of living, to ecotourism as compared to flying somewhere and maybe undertaking activities that might not have such a positive impact on the planet. We are trying to cast light on the fact that there are a lot of different ways you can take action in your daily life, diets being one of them, eating more plant-based, for example, for some people going vegan. But as I said, it's not an option for everyone, but we highlight that. Yeah, there is a place for everyone to make changes, but exactly where you make these changes might depend a lot on your personal abilities and personal condition.
But do you both think that we sometimes tiptoe too much around certain arguments, and that maybe we're not ourselves personally, but some others may not lead by example because it feels like it's not right, it's not easy, or it's not talked about enough? People are not really engaging in information, which is something that we've all touched in our episodes about being informed, well informed. So do you think that sometimes people tiptoe too much about arguments and don't really talk about it?
Yeah, I think so. I think often people are so worried about the social pressures around that and what are people going to think or react. And I think that links into having this idea of needing to be such an extreme activist, is rather just normalize being environmentally friendly. It doesn't need to be this big thing, rather just include it in your everyday life. But also I think we need to be better at having those uncomfortable conversations, whether it's with a family member who doesn't believe in climate change or something. You don't have to make it a fight to have a productive debate and to see the other side of an argument. Rather, it doesn't need to be a bad thing to have difficult conversations, because I think seeing other people's perspectives is really important in understanding how complex this issue is as well. And maybe they've just heard about it in a different context, or you could bring new information to how something like climate change is going to affect everyone's life. And I think especially for people in the middle class, we don't necessarily see it in our everyday life, even though there are signs. And so I think it's about education and about wanting to learn new information and share that information. And I think people just need to be more open to that.
Unless you vote for Trump. Yeah. The whole thing with the Paris Agreement, I guess that was very interesting. And to connect to what you're saying, Amy, it was very nice to see how single states in America, they signed an agreement themselves to be more carbon neutral, to be more, environmentally aware of what was going on, regardless of whether the president of the United States, was actually doing something about it or not. Which brings to, you can set an example by even making a bigger statement in that sense. Yeah. So even though the same, again, president of the United States is not doing anything about it and is going to maybe go against you, but still you can make a difference. So I agree with what you're saying, and we should definitely talk about the harder topics. So Lena, do you think that we tiptoe too much around certain things we say? Not us, but in general.
Sure. I mean, a lot of topics are very politicized, which makes it more difficult to deal with them, especially on the international stage and when there's different interests at play. But I think it's also a privilege to have the time to educate oneself about all of these topics, because there are so many dimensions to it. I think it is a privilege to have the time to be able to educate oneself on all of the different topics, and hopefully we are able to share some areas where people will feel empowered to make changes in their personal life. And there's so many different angles to, taking climate action or taking positive action for the environment, that people will gain new insights where previously the connections hadn't been made, that there's some simple choices in your life that you can change that will have a positive impact. So there's a lot of topics that need to be discussed, and I think opening the discussion also opens a floor not just for discussing different topics, but reflecting about them, and maybe also how they're interconnected.
And I think that Clearing the Air is here for this. I guess like one mission we talked about, all three of us, is to get experts on the podcast that are also people who could not believe in climate science, who could believe in a little less agreed upon facts, and have something to tell us, have something to inform the audience, and possibly by asking the right questions, we could engage in a conversation that can open up to a more truthful conversation about where are we going, are we doing the right thing, and can we do something about our planet? Because in my personal aspect, talking to Paula, talking to Bob, listening to your episode, Amy, it was a lot of so many enthusiastic environmentalists. Are we doing actually something about this? Why does it still feel a little heavy on the mind and on the heart a little bit that it's very hard to see changes? And even experts, in my impression is that don't really agree on who has to make the change. I've spoken to experts who've told me, it's just the people. The people make the change, politics will make the change. Surely you can put pressure from below up, but you kind of need to make changes even up, down. Companies, energy companies, oil industries, the meat industry again. So we can do as much as we can, but I cannot go to a company and just throw stones at their building. I can't do that. It's just not going to work. And even if I try to change politics, some experts have become politicians themselves exactly for this reason, because in my personal view, you get sometimes so frustrated about the conversation, politicians saying so much and yet not bringing forward to what they say. Or again, I'll still mention, Trump, Obama did so much, and then Trump just came over and with a card brought down the whole thing. So changes have to happen at all levels.
So yeah, as Asia said, change does need to happen on all levels. We hope that we can bring some new dimensions to this discussion in the future. Stay tuned for the next episodes of Clearing the Air, and stay safe and see you all soon.